Hello and welcome. It's been a while since I've shared some Torah on a podcast, or actually podcasts in general. And so I'm excited to share this thought with you this week. And I have to give a Karsa Tov gratitude to Rabbi Shmuel Feld, who inspired this Devar Torah. Rabbi Shmuel Feld is the founding director of JEIC, the Jewish Education Innovation Challenge. And we were talking last week about their upcoming Innovators Retreat, their 8th annual, and their focus on expanding space for God. And if there ever was a Parsha that really was speaking to us about creating space for God, for Hashem, it's this week's Parsha. So as I was reading the Parsha and learning about the Mishkan, my thoughts went to a show that I watched a long time ago from MTV. It was back in 2000 where MTV launched the documentary, and you can't see me, but I'm air quoting documentary, but the documentary show Cribs, which featured tours of celebrity mansions. Now, as a young man, I was excited, to get this inside view of the rich and famous. However, after a few episodes, something dawned on me. These homes were empty. I don't mean physically. These were huge, beautiful homes filled with amazing art, huge fish tanks, extravagant pools, exotic cars, and so much more. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that none of these huge structures felt like a home, but rather they were a showpiece for these celebrities to show the viewers how rich they were. There was little warmth of personality that related to who these people were beyond the surface. These homes were missing a soul. In fact, as the show continued, it was marred by controversy. There were episodes featuring cars that didn't belong to the celebrities and filmed in homes that were not actually theirs. And in this week's Parsha's Terumah, the Jewish people build a home, a very special home, a home for God. And despite its beauty, I assure you it never would have been featured on an episode of Cribs. It was simply too authentic for the show. And let's take a look at how the Mishkan was created. Unlike the Jewish law to give charity, the collection of money for the Mishkan was completely voluntary. As the Pasuk says, the contributions must be from every person whose heart inspires to generosity. The Jews had to want to build this home. In fact, as found in the Chumash Masoros HaRav, a beautiful Chumash, a commentary based on the teachings of Rav Joseph Soloveitchik, the Rav points out that the request for gold, silver, and copper illustrates how much they actually wanted it. The gold, silver, and copper that they owned were the spoils or reparations from their times as slaves in Egypt. The Rav highlights that, quote, the people's willingness to give up these hard-earned possessions that they received from Egyptians is precisely what hallowed and sanctified the sanctuary. The Mishkan was a home being built out of pure love and desire to be close to Hashem. And it's a symbol for what it takes to have a home worthy of Hashem as its guest. And the Rav expounds on this idea and describes man as, quote, basically a homeless being. No matter how big and beautiful a person's home is, they're subject to the forces of nature. And, quote, the only home where man can find security is in the Ribbono Shel Olam, in Hashem, in God. God is called Me'ona, an abode, a dwelling. So how do we create such a home? That's a huge question, but it starts with asking ourselves, do we really, truly want it? The Rav continues that, quote, the Mishkan was to be built only if the nation felt the need to build a home for God on their own. And for God to, and this is so beautiful, for God to descend from infinity into the Mishkan built by man, sacrifice was required. And in this case, the sacrifice was giving of the hard-earned spoils of Egypt voluntarily. And for us, the lesson's clear. Do we look at our homes as something to show the world we have made it on our own without God? Or do we look at our homes as a place for God to dwell? Whether large or small, do we make space for God? Are we willing to create a home with a soul that says to ourselves, our family, and the world, God lives here? If we are, then we've overcome the most difficult part. Once we have the desire and the willingness to sacrifice, all we need to do is then take out the blueprint, the Torah, and get to building. Shabbat Shalom.
בראשית ברא אלוהים את השמיים ואת הארץ.